I've got a bit of a frog in my throat, but I can still speak. It's a pleasure to talk to you about, I think, in this case, the most important issues that I want to talk about. And I'm going to dedicate this to a close friend, Kappa Cornforth, Sir John Cornforth, Nobel laureate. He's now 94. This was taken when he was 18, when he was realized that he was going to be deaf, completely deaf for the rest of his life. And he wrote a very important article, Scientists as Citizens. Put his name in. It's on that website, the Vega Science website. And you'll see a fantastic article, one that has had a big effect on me. Okay, so it's basically science, society, and responsibility. And there are lots of issues, and I should put my cards on the table. That basically, I'm not here to make you feel comfortable. I'm here to make you think. And that's sometimes hard, because sometimes you think of things that you don't really want to think about. And this gentleman is Kant. And he's, I think, one of the philosophers who made a very important statement. And it said, Aufklärung ist der Ausgang des Menschen aus seiner selbstverschuldeten Unmündigkeit. Okay, so I'm going to translate that. It's in a book, in an article, the answer to the question, what is enlightenment? And he says, enlightenment is man's emergence from his self-imposed mental immaturity. This immaturity is an inability to use one's own understanding without another's guidance. This immaturity is self-imposed if its cause lies not in lack of understanding, but in indecision and lack of courage to use one's own mind without another's guidance. And that's what this lecture is going to be about you taking the courage in your own hands and really to make decisions. Now, I know leadership is a big thing in this country, but I think of leadership as a teacher to actually nurture the ability of you as students not to need to be led, okay? And not to lead, but to think for yourself. And of course, leaders, for instance, it's akin to this. And of course, you don't need to be led. In fact, there's another thing, is what's the point, really, of leading a flock of sheep, you see? You can lead, but if they're sheep, they should be people who can discuss, who can talk to you on equal terms. And that's what is important. And this is one of my favorite stamps, okay? Now, my favorite quotation is very appropriate for this one. If you make people think they're thinking, they love you. But if you really make them think, they hate you. And that's all too true when it comes to very serious issues. Kappa, in this article, Scientists as Citizens, which I really hope many of you will read. I think it's a fantastic article. He's a man of great wisdom. I love him dearly. He's now 94, 95. His wife, Rita, who was his ears and communicator, died only a few months ago. He says, it may seem odd that a system of knowledge based on doubt could have been the driving force in constructing modern civilization. Scientists do not believe, they check. I'm not asking you to believe anything I say on a scientific matter, only that there is tested evidence for all of it, and I know the nature of that evidence and can make a judgment of its worth. That's what it's about, and we're going to hammer that point home throughout this. On education, Kappa says this, I should like to see a different emphasis put on teaching of science, an emphasis that would really reflect the truth that the sciences are different from nearly all other subjects taught. Languages, literature, religion, law, art, music, even pure mathematics are all human constructions, and they can be taught on the basis that these things are so because men made them so. But science deals with the natural world, which men did not make at all. And the honest way to teach it is these things are probably so because of this and that and this. A student will become a scientist all the faster by doubting the teacher and looking at the evidence. No lesson is learned so well as the one you teach yourself. And the student who will not become a scientist, the habit of asking the questions like, who say so? How do they know? What's missing? What are the assumptions? What's the scale? It's all about the same. Is it all about the same thing? Do the figures make sense? We'll make them more receptive to the message of science for the rest of their lives. And that's an issue because only 1 or 2% of the world are scientists. 1 or 2% created the modern world that we now live in. Your iPods, the electricity, the polymers, the drugs and all these things. Only about 1 or 2% of the world. And so here's my alter ego, okay? So if you wanted to know who that was. Feynman, all of them say something about doubt. In this great book, very short, I recommend it. The freedom to doubt is an important matter in the sciences, and I believe in other fields. It was born out of a struggle. It was a struggle to be permitted to doubt, to be unsure. And I do not want to forget this importance, the importance of that struggle, and by default let it fall away. If you know you're unsure, you have a chance to change the situation. And I like this line. I want to demand this freedom for future generations. This is for you. This is what is under threat at the present time, that freedom to question. You must learn lean over backwards, as Feynman put it, to resist belief. Arthur Miller. The job is to ask questions, it always was, and ask them as inexorably as I can, and to face the absence of precise answers with a certain humility. There are going to be problems where there are no precise answers, okay? And people will tell you there are precise answers, but you know probably in your heart there aren't, and you have to recognize that. Bertrand Russell, the fundamental cause of trouble in the world is that the stupid are cocksure whilst the intelligent are full of doubt, all right? So questioning is the issue. There was a first Enlightenment. I mean, the Greeks actually were starting to cast off their mystical attitudes and develop a theory, a sort of way of thinking, okay, an use of reason, okay. It was the age of the first Enlightenment, and the new free thought movement was a precious humanitarian concept of doubt. This wonderful painting by Raphael of the School of Athens, if you blow it up, there are Plato and Aristotle. And in fact, that almost certainly isn't Hypatia, although some people think. Aristotle said it would be difficult to reach a positive conclusion in these matters unless they be frequently discussed. It is by no means fruitless to be doubtful on particular points. They're hammering it away to question. I'm going to talk about the birth of natural philosophy next week. But Abelard, the 12th century religious philosopher, was very important in that movement. In Sic et Non, he says, by doubting we come to inquire, and by inquiry we arrive at truth. We'll follow that through in the next lecture. Pasteur, as I mentioned last week, he says, in the fields of observation, chance favors only the prepared mind. You are here now, preparing your mind, the mind to question and doubt. And what is it? What do we do? Well, here is Jacob Bronowski, and there's a fantastic series of programs, and they're all on YouTube, 13 BBC programs by Bronowski on the ascent of man, putting into context the sciences and their impact on humanity, society, the human race, and also culture, in a way that I don't think anyone else did. Cosmos was very good by Carl Sagan, but this guy did what I think was brilliant, and it's a 13-part series. You can watch them all on YouTube. Try and look for it. And what is he doing? We're playing with his grandson, and this is one of the first experiments, okay? That little boy is putting a cube, presumably through a square hole. So that's basically the start of it, and if we now go to perhaps the most important aspect in my training was Meccano, okay? I had a Meccano, so you guys think of it as a rector set. And I love this ad. Compare it with the violent advertisements you see at the present moment for toys and violent toys. Meccano boys, and of course today we've got to add girls, are keen, ambitious, and inventive, okay? No boy or girl who follows the Meccano hobby can be a bad boy or bad girl. All right, but basically this is where I learned to put things together with nuts and bolts, okay? And we've done this many times. 10 years I was at the British Association, and one sees young kids absolutely engrossed in building things with nuts and bolts. And today, as a chemist, that's what we in the chemistry department do. We build things, not with nuts and bolts, but with electrons and atoms, okay? And I mentioned this last time, but very important again, is photography. And because there weren't that many in that first lecture, I want you to realize what it was like to take a photograph. This is my old camera. I knew everything about it. And basically you can see that there's a lot of work involved in taking a photograph. You had to go through all this, okay, to take a photograph. And we're only halfway through, all right. Then you have to develop the film, fix it, take it out, hang it out to dry, put it in a printer because it's negative to get the positives. And all that had to be done to get a photograph. And as I said, you have to have a pretty good incentive to do that, and she's here in the audience. But today, all you really need to do is that. And what do you know about what's going on? What have you learned? Well, you've taken a good photograph, but I became a chemist. I was fixing these things. I understood all the processes. So that's an interesting aspect, perhaps more than anything else, of the disconnection between you and the technologies that you have. The contributions of science and technology. Basically, all these things really would disappear if there'd been no science, and particularly chemistry. Just think about what your life would be like without these. And I think it's important because people don't think very much about science. And chemistry and physicists, engineers and physicists and biology could say the same. But I want you to have a look at what I think is the most humanitarian contribution of chemistry. This was amputation before there was an anesthetic. Women had mastectomies without an anesthetic. I believe there is no more humanitarian contribution from chemistry to society than anesthetics. And we've all, I'm sure, had them. But there are many other things. Penicillin, okay. Fleming noticed that bacteria out of petri did not grow when he had this culture, okay. But it was actually something like 10 years later that when the World War II started, that soldiers were dying, mainly from the bacterial infections of their wounds. And it was then that that observation came into its own. Florey, Chain, and Heatley actually developed ways of making more. And here is one of the unsung heroes of that story. I want you to have a look at what it was like in 1940. This little girl would have died in 1941. In 3 weeks, she was cured by penicillin. Okay, and that is the miracle drug. You don't have to pray, it works. Okay, and there's a problem. Bacteria are evolving with an immunity to antibiotics. Think about it. We desperately need young people like you to recognize that the future is perilous, to solve the problems of this kind, because this is coming back. And there's probably no one in this room who hasn't actually had an antibiotic, or in fact, many of you probably wouldn't even be in this room if it weren't for antibiotics, okay? It's been so important. What other things? Well, lasers. I mean, this is a remarkable thing. What happens in a laser, basically, if you have absorption, a photon comes in and a molecule goes into an excited state, and you get the blue color. It absorbs red, and so blue passes through. There's also something called spontaneous emission, where a molecule in an upper state gives out light. That's what you see in the Bunsen burner. There's also stimulated emission, and that's an important one. In stimulated emission, a photon comes in and two come out, okay? And because we have something called the Boltzmann Factor, okay, that most molecules are in the lower state, basically you get absorption. What you need is to get most molecules in an excited state. And here's Boltzmann statistics. So basically, if you're looking at a standard molecule at room temperature, there's more in the lower state than the upper state, and so you get absorption. We're used to that. But this gentleman on the left is Charlie Towns, and he recognized something that nobody else had realized. He said, if I can arrange to get, say, a tube of gas, or a sort of some sort of gas, where all the molecules were in the excited state, something remarkable could happen. Basically, the first one could spontaneously emit. I get 2, I then get 3, and then I get 4, and I get more light out, and that's the laser. Very simple idea, and it comes directly from Einstein's sort of relations for radiation. Now, one thing that does irritate me to some extent is that the great contributions of science really are not recognized. There's a gentleman in this town, fantastic guy, because I heard him when he came out of prison. He's 24 years in jail for a crime he didn't commit. He came out and said, I'm not angry, I'm not bitter, but I'm determined to get on with my life. Okay, this guy was quite remarkable. He said, it's been a long time coming. He said, I thank God for this day. His faith kept him going, but science actually got him out. And here is Sir Alec Jeffreys, a friend of mine, who actually developed fingerprinting. I'm not sure that anybody thinks about the people who, you are the people who develop these things. And that's why I say it's misplaced credit. Anesthetics, antibiotics, DNA fingerprinting, and death row. I don't know, several hundred people have now been sort of saved from death row by DNA fingerprinting. Another humanitarian contribution of chemistry. But who are this 1 or 2% of people who change the world? Nobody really appreciates who they are. And here is the reason. Can they shake off the media image, okay? And we all know who's, I mean, I know it looks like me, okay? I took off my glasses, but there you go. And then this guy, he's thought to be a famous scientist, but actually he's an imposter. He didn't do all those things, okay? The guy who did it was this guy. Yeah, young Einstein. He was, in fact, 17 when he started to think, what was it be like to travel at the velocity of light? He was young as you people. You are now in the most creative phase. You probably don't have the experience that's needed, but you will never be more creative than you are at this moment, okay? So as Eric said, you are so fortunate to be at a university like this, because you're only a small number in the whole population of this world. And we'll see that some other people are much less fortunate than you are. Don't waste it. You do yourself a disservice, but you really, those people who can't come to university, if you don't want to do it, go and let somebody else come who really does want to come. Think of it in those terms. Darwin, this is the picture one thinks about, but in fact it was young Charlie who went on that journey to the Galapagos and came up with the theory of evolution. And in fact, here is his first phylogenetic tree. And this tattoo there, won't go further than that. And in fact, I've designed a t-shirt here. And in fact, believe it or not, I got it on. Don't worry, I won't take anything else off. Okay. But anyway, but basically here is a bumper sticker. And it's a secret society. It doesn't say what it is. Only you know what this means. And if you want one, just come and get them. I've got enough for everybody in the audience, okay? And hopefully you'll put it on your car, all right? So free bumper stickers, okay? You don't have to pay for them, okay? Of course, you have to have a car to put them on, but there you go. Clerk Maxwell basically created these equations. These equations, every time you use your, how many people got a mobile phone, okay? All right, yeah, everybody. You have proved that these equations are true every time you use the mobile phone, because those are the equations of electromagnetism. If that didn't work, your mobile phone doesn't work, okay? Every time, okay? And when he did it, he was wee Jamie with a little quiff on the top of his head. Okay? He was a Scotsman, a very young guy, brilliant genius. Rosalind Franklin took the most important photograph of all time. I claim that this is the most important photograph. The importance of this photograph has yet to be appreciated, because it led to the structure of DNA. Chandrasekhar was a young man when he realized that a star 1.5 times the size of the sun would collapse into a neutron star. You are now the most creative time of your life. Get a little bit more experience and you do great things. The problem is, it's not people like this that are the icons. We've got people like this guy who's a Scientologist, and there you go. And Jim Heath, Sean O'Brien, and Yuan Liu, and John Hare are the students who worked on our project. Think about that, because that's important. And here is something that indicates what science is about. These people are from Spain, Ireland, Syria, Holland, Taiwan, Mexico, and India. If you're a scientist, you are international brotherhood, because, as Kappa said, science, we didn't make it. So everybody in the world is just looking at the way the universe works. And here at Florida State, I think it's one of the best things that we ever did was to come here. These are my co-workers, Steve Aqua, who's I think somewhere back there, Daryl Ventura, Artery Span, Prashant Jain, Nicola Pugno, and Paul Dunk. Actually, this guy doesn't come into the lab too often, but they're supposed to be smart, but you never know. Okay, I thought he should be in the shade. All right. Anyway, that's it. It's been a fantastic thing, and it's an international brotherhood and sisterhood. Science of the 21st century. What exactly is nanoscience and nanotechnology? Well, it's self-assembly, okay? And the question is, what can you do? Well, for instance, Will it one day be possible to create a computer by bottom-up chemistry, okay? Pouring things together. Well, it's already been done. Your brain is some sort of computing device, and it's been built by bottom-up assembly, all right? And that's what nanotechnology is, okay? If you think about genetic engineering, okay, this animal, all right, without any knowledge of DNA, has been made into a chihuahua, okay? Same DNA, all right? And in fact, if you take this definition, atom by atom, molecule by molecule assembly of a complex or functional system, then you are the examples of nanotechnology. You've been built up, atom by atom, protein by protein, on the basis of a DNA blueprint. I think this century is going to be the century of molecular machines. This is hemoglobin. In your body, it's a molecular machine pulsing. If it didn't do this, you could not breathe. You would not be able to survive, because it traps oxygen in your lungs where there's plenty of it, and then releases it where it's needed, okay? It was the first molecular machine, and Max Perutz was the person who discovered it. I guess my favorite molecular machine is this one. It's ATP synthase. These little bubbles on the mitochondria have really turned out to be rather interesting. And here we'll see this amazing machine. This is inside your body. There are millions of them inside your body. And what is happening is that protons are going onto this wheel, the positive charges, they're neutralizing the negative charge and turning this wheel just like an electric motor, not driven by electrons, but driven by protons in aqueous solution. So if anyone said, build an electric motor which will work in water, I wouldn't have known how to do it until I saw this. This works in aqueous solution. It's incredible. So anything's possible. And again, this is the molecule which creates the ATP. As you breathe, as you move, all your energy is locked up in ATP. ATP to ADP plus energy. Fantastic thing. And the future, we're going to make machines like that to do great things. Okay, society, the second part. The serious issues. I call this section the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. In fact, there's more than 4. There's some problems that we face. And I want to tell you about the perspective of about 90% of the scientific community. It's people like Kappa and Feynman. And I'm going to put what I think about science here. And these are the aspects of science. The first is there's a body of knowledge. And then there's the application of that knowledge, technology. And then there's the scientific method. How do we actually gain new knowledge? Those are 3 separate things, but there's something far more important. And because science is so valuable and useful, people have forgotten that actually more important than all of that is an intellectual and cultural issue. In fact, people think that unless the science is important, it's of no use at all. And that's not true. One thing is true, that many of the discoveries of 100 years ago are only now being found applications for them. As far as I'm concerned, we ought to think of the old name of science. It was natural philosophy. And the most important aspect is this. It is the complete set of philosophical constructs we have devised to determine whether something is true with a significant degree of reliability. I'm going to say it again. It is the complete set of philosophical constructs we have devised to determine whether something is true with a significant degree of reliability. And the ethical purpose of education must involve the teaching of young people how they can decide what they're being told is actually true. Am I telling you the truth? Are you telling yourself the truth? The easiest person to mislead is yourself. Okay. Thus, the teaching as a fundamental process, okay, as a fundamental process of a skeptical, evidence-based assessment of all claims, without exception, is surely an intellectual integrity issue which all teachers should address. Without evidence, anything goes. Think about it. The great enemy of the truth, is very often not the lie, deliberate, contrived, and dishonest, but the myth, persistent, persuasive, and unrealistic. And I love this line: belief in myths allows the comfort of opinion without the discomfort of thought. There's a lot of that around. People making decisions and not really thinking about the consequences. You'd be surprised who said it. One of your presidents. Okay. All right. Anti-science, sustainability, mystical and political dogma, and nuclear proliferation. Those are only 4. There are many more, it seems to me. Anti-science. Well, here is a bit of film.
Okay, welcome back. We're ready to resume our discussion of the 105th Congress during your visit here for inauguration. And we're very pleased to have with us the Senate Majority Leader, Trent Lott of Mississippi, if you'd help us welcome.
Thank you, Senator. Good morning. I would like to know, what advice would you give to a prospective student who is interested in following a career path similar to a senator?
Similar to a senator?
Yes.
Well, first of all, I want to encourage you to take maximum advantage of your educational opportunities. We live in a great country. We have a great educational system that's not perfect. We spend an awful lot of money that doesn't always give us the results that we want. But I can assure you, whatever you want to do in life, education will help you get a faster start. For instance, when I was in high school, if you were in the so-called pre-college curriculum, you had to take 4 years of science and 4 years of math. A waste of my time, a waste of the teacher's time, and a waste of space. You know, I took physics. For what? Uh-oh, every physics teacher in America is out to lynch me. Physics is great. And I think we need the best possible physics teachers and the best students in physics we can get if you're going into physics or mathematics or science or medicine. But if you want to be a lawyer and you know that's where you're headed, maybe you'd be better off taking an economics course, a typing course, a computer course, or music, for heaven's sake, because it's good for the soul.
Now, there are lots of interesting aspects, and I hope you're going to think carefully about what he said. The first thing is, what was very dispiriting was that almost all the audience of those young people started cheering. And I was looking around the audience here, and I saw a very different attitude here, which was very pleasing. The second thing is you do music because it's good for the soul. Well, I think I've shown you that the contribution to anesthetics, and I mean music, playing music whilst you're having your leg cut off probably is probably useful, but I think an anesthetic would be better. But I think that abounds out there. And lawyers of all people are going to make decisions on scientific and technical issues, and they need to understand things of this nature. I won't go further. Global warming is a hoax. Well, there are 3 senses. What are they? Common sense. Well, common sense tells me that the sun goes around the earth. Who agrees with me? The sun goes around the earth. Yeah. Oh, I'm glad a few people agree with me. It's pretty obvious. I mean, I got up this morning, the sun was over there, and this evening it's over there. So it obviously goes around us, okay? Agree? I got a few friends on my side. Well, let me tell you that Giordano Bruno, this is a film that I can't see again because I saw the ending. This was to be burnt to death by the Inquisition for one of the things, for accepting and propagating Copernicus' view that the sun was at the center of the solar system. So those of you who are convinced that actually the Earth goes around the sun would have been burnt to death 500 years ago. Think about it. Okay, it's uncommon sense that tells us that the Earth is turning on its axis. That makes it seem to us as though the sun is going around us. The uncommon sense and bravery of these people and Giordano Bruno, and you know Galileo was threatened by the Inquisition. How many of you know the evidence for the fact that the Earth is turning on its axis? 1 or 2 people. That's very interesting. I want you to think about this because I think most of you know that the Earth is going around the sun and the Earth is turning on its axis, but you don't know the evidence. So you've accepted without checking. Scientists check, all right, what it is, okay? And that one of the big problems today is that people are believing a load of stuff for which there is no evidence whatsoever. And it could be important. And that's the problem. It's frightening as ever more powerful weapons become available. And it's back to justification in mystical dogma to drag us back into the Dark Ages. Now, nonsense is common now. All right, let's see one example of it. There's plenty of it. $27 million creation museum in Cincinnati. I went there and we took some photographs. The students in Cincinnati took me to this. School children in busloads are going there, and other groups as well. And they're being told, did humans live with dinosaurs? Well, God made Adam and Eve on the same day as land animals, so dinosaurs and people lived at the same time. What did they originally eat? All animals, including dinosaurs, were vegetarian. Well, you don't need those teeth to eat salad. What happened to dinosaurs? They didn't go into Noah's Ark. They were drowned in the flood 4,350 years ago, and many were buried and preserved as fossils. And in fact, there's a Noah's Ark there, and Noah's there, and he's Scottish. He's got a Scottish accent. He says, there's a big flood coming, and we've got to build a big boat to survive. Okay. And children are going in here and accepting that. And this is important, okay? Because I told you that bacteria are evolving which are immune to antibiotics, okay? We know a lot about these things, and that's the problem. In fact, I would say there's no theory that has got more proof than Darwin's theory of evolution, okay? And one of the most beautiful ones is basically this. I noticed when I was a kid at school, because geography was I thought, that's funny, South America seems to fit into Africa. And in my lifetime, the most unbelievable discovery has been made of tectonic drift. It's so beautiful, so fantastic, and so wonderful. 230 million years ago, Africa and South America were joined. If that is true, then the animals in South America and Africa must have been the same. And in fact, they were. And we know when it was because there's the mid-Atlantic trench and the magnetic field stripes are in there. And there's like a tape recorder, so we know that they were separated 230 million years ago. And the fossils in South America in the Triassic period are the same. It's so beautiful and such a wonderful theory that fits so many things. In fact, from every area, from chemistry, physics to oceanography, volcanology, etc. Okay. I think one of my favorite discoveries is that I'm so closely related to this guy. Okay, just look at the humanity in that face. I mean, he's clearly. I come from Bolton, and we've just been beaten by Manchester United, so I feel that he recognizes that. Or in fact, if it was American football, it'd be, I guess, Florida, University of Florida football. They've just been beaten by Florida State, hopefully. Okay. But look at this beautiful animal. We're related. 50% of your genes are the same as a fruit fly, and the maggots as well. Okay. They're your relations, your cousins. My favorite is this one. 70% of your genes are the same as a pumpkin. And the proof is the average politician, which you... All right. We've seen the Darwin t-shirt and logo. Okay. Climate change. This is a vexed question. A scientist does not say there is climate change. What we say as a teacher, as a scientist, is the following. Be skeptical. It is scientific to be skeptical about the evidence, okay? That's the primary law of science, to be skeptical and discuss the evidence and ask to draw your own conclusion. What about evidence? Is there more or less rainfall? What about temperature? Is it rising or falling? Are glaciers receding? What about sea level? Is it rising? What about animals? Are they moving from their habitats? What about CO2? Is it going up or down? Hurricanes, are there more or less? What about ice in the Arctic and Antarctic? You look at this and you find that, things don't look good. We don't actually know, but it looks pretty bad, and it does look as though we've got climate change. And there's some reasonable evidence that we're responsible, but it's not 100%. A scientist can never say it's 100%. But the way that one must discuss it when you talk to people is look at all the evidence and draw your own conclusions. Okay, so that's what it's all about. And I have what I call my 4 out of 5 rule. And I know that Jack, who's in the audience, takes me to task, but I still love it because I invented it. You love your own children. Okay, 4 out of 5. If you make an observation, even if they do things that are wrong, develop a hypothesis to explain, and carry out some further experiments to test the validity of your hypothesis. 5 would be good. If 4 observations out of 5 fit, you're almost, accent on almost, certainly right. If only 1 out of 5 fits, you're almost excellent, almost certainly wrong. And in fact, if you do some average statistics, it looks as though you're 99% probability that the experiment that did not fit is probably in error. Okay. Okay, so that's it. We had 8 or 9. Sustainability. Saving the planet will require some technical fixes, okay? And in fact, I have sort of thought about this, and it's more important probably than anything else. And this is a problem that I think, Eric, you've got very deep in your heart, that this university is going to play a part in a sustainable future. Chemistry, molecular physics, biological chemistry, nanosciences looks like the only show in town, and physics, if we can get fusion. And the first 3 high sustainability technologies, splitting water into hydrogen and oxygen, efficient solar electricity production, and genetically develop a wheat that can fix it on nitrogen. About 10% of the oil is on the land, okay? You don't realize it's not just going into your car and being burned, okay? I mean, it's a crime to burn it. The most important thing about oil is it is the source of all our petrochemicals, all the plastics and all our materials at the present time. But a lot is going into food production and tractors going backwards and forwards. I don't know, if you've been in a plane, I'm looking down, I see all the fields, I'm just thinking, a tractor's gone backwards and forwards all over it. You know, it's an interesting thought, okay. Water splitting is required, okay. But there's something else. And my favorite animal is this guy. And you know what it's sitting on, right? It's a dung beetle, right? And dung beetles are responsible for really turning out a lot of waste material. But here is our waste material in Britain. 140,000 refrigerators just dumped in a field, okay? So my logo for the future, we've got to get rid of our own waste, okay? And this is it, okay? A logo for a sustainable world. I do logos as well. Well, what about it? I seek not the answer, but to understand the question. You can realize I love quotations. I love some smart people who've made some clever stuff. And I love this one so much. I seek not the answer, but to understand the question. Because I realize that if you start to understand the question, it's halfway to the answer, believe it or not. And I thought, well, I've got to find out who actually first said it. So where do you go? Obviously go here, put it in, and who was it? It was me. Or it was I. It turned out I'd used it so much that Google assigned it to me. But in fact, if you look a little bit more deeply into it and change it slightly, I seek not to know the answers, but to understand the questions, you discover it's Kung Fu, okay, which will do. It probably goes back to Taoism and Confucianism, because it's a very deep sort of thought. Saving the planet will require some societal fixes. Needs to change our habits. And we need a reverence for nature to save the rainforest. And we've got to teach our children to love trees as much as they do their animals, okay? But it's going to be difficult. Oh, that's something, okay. Well, let's go together with this one. Our survival is a global citizenship project, okay? And we can't just do it on. There's no time for provincial attitudes. We now have to work with every other country on the planet to save the world. And it seems to me we've got to throw away our sort of medieval, patriotic, nationalistic attitudes, because we are all members of the human race, and we hope that we're going to survive, and it's going to be difficult. And I love this line from Benjamin Franklin: we must all hang together, or assuredly we shall all hang separately. And that's what he said, apparently, at the signing of the US Declaration of Independence. And I think now it's not just about the USA, it's about the planet. And you are part of that sort of effort to save it. All right, so there, let's get out of that and go to where I want to get to. Okay, I want to get to here. All right. Naresh told me it's Gandhi's birthday today.
That's correct.
He was born in, I think, 1869. And I think I did something, but I seem to have, I thought I'd put it in. But anyway, if I can remember a quote by him, what was it? It was,
We are the ones.
I'll remember it by the end of the lecture. Okay, there's so many. What I wanted to talk about was a reverence for animals. You need to set a good example, okay? Now I want you to realize this fish is still alive, okay? And neurological studies, if any of you are neurologists, they've been studying these fish, and these fish feel as much pain as your pet kitten, all right? So when you go fishing, think about that. And they don't have a vocal cord, and if they had one and they'd be squealing like a kitten, I think these little children would not be quite so happy. And I think one should learn about other animals and the pain that they feel. Father and son, some of you will have children, and I hope you will be different from this guy who's just shot this unbelievable animal. Now, I don't think he's going to have it in a hamburger or a beer burger or anything. But why did he do it? I don't like shooting, and what are these? I mean, there's some problem about it. I don't think it's hard to shoot a sheep, and this one sums up something that bothers me. There's less. I didn't see a gun until I came to this country when I was a postdoc. There's another way, and I hope you'll think about this when you bring up your own children, to make things. And in fact, these animals have been shot, but with a camera, okay? I think that's an important aspect, because the way we think about animals is something the way that we think about the human race. There are major issues as well, such as the population explosion. 30,000 years, 5 million. And it goes up, and it's going up at a staggering rate. We're expecting something like 10 million people on the planet. And we're already a quarter of the world is starving. Those are issues that need to be solved as well. And as Malthus said, no technology can save us from unfettered population growth on a planet with limited resources. Well, it's business as usual, basically. Don't get carried away. We live on this little blue dot, okay? There are 10 to the 22 stars in the universe. That's quite a lot, more than that in planets, okay? Basically, nobody else cares whether we live or die. The dodos came and went, okay? Extinction is just what's going to happen, okay? We're just improving the business efficiency, it seems to me, all right? So let's live for the present and try to make our world a better one. Mystical and political dogma. Well, you might wonder what this is. It's the Declaration of Independence in the little town of Lewes, where we live in England, very close to the White Cliffs. There's a castle, Lewes Castle. It's a very important little town in the history of things like liberal democratic rights. In here, there's a little painting, and it's Thomas Paine. Thomas Paine lived in our town, and here he is. He's there, actually, outside Bull House. The house still exists. And he actually used to go into this place, and he's a very important figure in the Enlightenment. He was very influential in the, basically the revolution, okay? And there's a White Hart Hotel, and here is a room in which Thomas Paine discussed and developed his liberal and democratic ideals. And I've spoken about Thomas Paine in this room, where he himself has spoken. So we in Lewes think that we are responsible for the USA, because Thomas Paine came from our town. And the Declaration of Independence had a lot of influence on it. In his writings, he had influence on the American Revolution, the French Revolution, and the free thought movement. But he said, "You will do me justice to remember that I've always supported the right of man to his own opinion, however different that opinion be from mine. He who denies to another this right makes a slave of himself to his present opinion, because he precludes himself the right of changing it." The main thing about science is that we're open, okay? We always recognize that we must move on, that things will change. And Jefferson, my second favorite president, says, because religious belief or non-belief is such an important part of every person's life, freedom of religion affects every individual. State churches that use government power to support themselves and to force their views on persons of other faiths undermine our civil rights. Erecting the wall of separation between church and state, therefore, is absolutely essential in a free society. I think my favorite president is Madison. considered the father of the Constitution. Probably more than anybody else, he understood what was in that Constitution. If the Virginia legislature passes into law the bill for religious freedom written by both the future third president of the United States, Thomas Jefferson, and Madison, in this measure they wrote that a person's civil rights should not depend in any way on that person's opinions on religion. They also wrote that everyone should be free to profess and to argue for any view on matters of religion, and that no one's legal rights should depend in any way on those views, whatever they may be. Madison, future fourth president, who collaborated with Jefferson, wrote the Memorial and Remonstrance against religious assessment in opposition to proposals in the Virginia legislature. Okay. He wrote that the religion, and this is the most interesting statement, the religion of each individual must be left to the conviction and conscience of each individual. He also said that such a right is inalienable because each of us makes up our minds about religion on only that evidence which our minds contemplate, and thus we cannot follow the dictates of others. This is a very, very clever, intelligent statement, and this is why I think he's my favorite. Sandra Day O'Connor, very important justice. In the school district versus Doe, which is in Santa Fe, affirmed that no government body can favor believers over non-believers by stating that no branch of government can communicate the message to anyone that because of either accepting or rejecting any religious belief, they are outsiders, not full members of the political community, and accompanying message to adherents that they are insiders, favored members of the political community. The court is, in so doing, adopted the 1984 language of Justice O'Connor from her concurring opinion. The truth then is that the First Amendment was designed, as Justice O'Connor has said, so that no branch of government can treat people differently based on God or gods they worship or do not worship. She's my favorite justice of the peace. Okay. Let's go on because we're running out of time, and I know the President has to go on because I want to talk about the last issue, nuclear proliferation. INES is an organization which, there are many organizations that are working to stop the proliferation of nuclear weapons, and I hope that many of you will try to do the same. If you're a physicist, I hope you won't make better atomic bombs. If you're a chemist, we don't need any more napalm. This iconic image, I just feel we have to realize that chemists have done bad things as well. Engineering, we don't need any more landmines. There are little kiddies playing soccer on crutches with one leg in something like Sierra Leone because one leg has been blown off by a landmine. And they're dreaming of going to the paraplegic Olympic Games. I think those are issues we have to take seriously. Leon Lederman, my friend, physics Nobel Prize winner, says, so many years have passed and the human race is still saddled with enough nuclear weapons to destroy the planet. We must redouble our efforts to unify the science community against this huge stupidity. Not just the scientific community, the whole community. He sent me this and said, you speak to a lot of young people, will you pass this on for him? I did have Gandhi. Victory obtained by violence is tantamount to defeat, for it is momentary. I like this one. We need to think about that statement. Perhaps the greatest man I ever knew personally was Joseph Rotblat. He was the only man, maybe only two, who left the Manhattan Project when it was clear that the atomic bomb was not necessary and it had not been completed. In his Nobel address, because he got the Nobel Prize for Peace with Pugwash, one of the only peace prizes that I think was worthy, we appeal as human beings to human beings. Remember your humanity and forget the rest. If you can do so, the way lies open to a new paradise. If you cannot, there lies before you the risk of universal death. The quest for a war-free world has a basic purpose, survival. But if in the process we learn how to achieve it, by love rather than by fear, by kindness rather than by compulsion, if in the process we learn to combine the essential with the enjoyable, the expedient with the benevolent, the practical with the beautiful, this will be an extra incentive to embark on this great task. Above all, remember your humanity and forget the rest. And here is Joe in his office because we filmed it. He's on my Vega website. And look at this. How the hell is that staying up? Anyway, I saw that after we took some pictures of it. I've got just a few things that I want to share with you, things that I think are wonderful. Stein, he said, I'm an alien creature. I was sent from another planet with a message of goodwill from my people. The message says, dear Earth people, when you finally at last destroy your planet and have no place to live, you can come and live with us. And we will teach you how to live in peace and harmony. And we will give you a coupon good for 10% of all deep dish pizzas too. Sincerely, Bob. All right. I love it. 3 things. Destroy the planet. I don't know, but it don't look good. The evidence is a bit worrying, or maybe very worrying. Peace and harmony, I do know this. Is it not incredible that whatever 200 politicians can't sit down in a room and solve the problems without sending young people like you to go and kill each other? Okay. But then there's a sense of humor with the pizza. Without a sense of humor, life's really not worth living. Finally, we're going to come to a couple of things. Kant said, for enlightenment of this kind, all that is needed is freedom. And the freedom in question is the most innocuous form of all. The freedom to make public use of one's reason in all matters. What Kant is saying here is that we all must be able to express our views openly without any fear of any form of retribution. My favorite book of the moment, and it's been for some time, is All Over Coffee. Great pictures of San Francisco, but with rather interesting comments. Set your ideals to those of the image of your idol, pull your collar tight and walk into the storm. Even better, take a stand, and automatically you have a supporter and an enemy. All right? You will need friends if you take a stand. And here are some young people who have taken a stand. Zach, he campaigned to keep creationism out of the public schools in Louisiana, okay? And you may have seen him on NPR. As a high school student, he campaigned against the Louisiana Science Education Act of Creationism law. And another unbelievable young woman, Malala, who many of you will know, okay, was shot by the Taliban. And all she wanted was an education. Now, if you come here and you waste the time, just think about this, okay? She would have loved to come to this place, right? Freely, without being shot, okay? So, think about that. Leonard Cohen and Rolling said, I don't consider myself a pessimist. I think of a pessimist as someone who's waiting for it to rain, and I'm soaked to the skin, okay? Well, me, I'm actually an optimist. I'll be well out of here when the shit hits the fan. And in fact, basically, we end up with Don Marquis, okay? I told you, if you make people think they're thinking, they love you, okay? And if you really make them think, they hate you. But he had an even better one. An optimist is a guy who's never had much experience. Thank you very much.